Hey guys, welcome to the video. So in this video, I'm going to give you 10 must-read Marvel comics. So this isn't like the top 10 Marvel comics of all time, it's just 10 Marvel comics I've read that I feel like everybody should check out. Kicking off the list, we have quite a recent event, and that's House of X, Powers of X. It was by Jonathan Hickman, and it basically like redoes all the X-Men and kind of like makes them more modern and makes them kind of fit better within the Marvel universe. They end up in this island called Krakoa, and it basically just kind of separates the X-Men from the Marvel universe, where they just kind of feel more at home, and you see like a lot of problems that the mutants have to deal with and stuff. And it's not just the X-Men that live on this island; it's all the mutants, and it's really cool. It's quite an interesting story. It's quite hard to explain, but I definitely recommend you check it out because it is quite a fun comic and it is an awesome read, and the artwork in it is amazing. Next on the list is Absolute Carnage. This is another recent comic book which I really loved. It basically focuses on Carnage as he tries to do the typical supervillain thing and takes over the full world, and Venom is the main protagonist of the book. You basically have Venom and Spider-Man teaming up and trying their absolute hardest to take down Carnage, and throughout this book we do see all these different versions of Carnage, different symbiotes. We get introduced to a bunch of new characters, and we see familiar characters getting taken over by some symbiotes, which is really cool, and you actually like a really cool combinations. I don't want to ruin them for anybody who wants to read it, but you get like a lot of awesome combinations with like current heroes with the symbiotes, and it just makes the story like feel really fun, but also it has that idea that no one's safe in this because there are some heavy character deaths in the book. Kind of went for this kind of like hyper realistic artwork in it, which I really liked because it made the symbiotes look really creepy, and it just kind of made the battle sequences feel a lot more brutal and kind of realistic. Well, it was realistic as you can get with a book full of symbiotes. And also Carnage in it is absolutely terrifying. Coming up next is probably one of the most darkest Spider-Man stories out there, and it's Kraven's Last Hunt. In this book, it's basically about Kraven trying his absolute best to hunt down Spider-Man, and he actually accomplishes this goal and buries Spider-Man alive for 2 weeks, and during the entire time that Spider-Man's buried alive, Kraven is basically going out and kidding on to be Spider-Man, and everyone knows there's something up, and even like people are clicking on it, this isn't the real Spider-Man. It's one of the like, most darkest Spider-Man comics I've read, but it's also one of the best. You just see how brutal Kraven Hunter can actually be, and just his end goal is to basically complete his hunt and take down Spider-Man. And that's what he does in this comic, and it just kind of shows you like after he thinks he kills Spider-Man, like he just kind of doesn't know what else to do with himself and wants to become Spider-Man, and it was awesome. It's an awesome read, and it just kind of gets you like a good idea of the mindset of Kraven and what he's like. Next up we have the 2015 Secret Wars. In this story we finally get the main 616 universe conversion with the Ultimate Comics as well, with none other than Doctor Doom being the main villain of the book, which I really loved. He's actually such a great villain in this book, and you get a lot of good character interactions throughout the story. It's a great retelling, well not retelling, but it's a great kind of like, I wouldn't really say sequel either, but it's basically a kind of modern updated version of the classic Secret Wars comic we got years in the 80s, and I really enjoyed this version because it focused on a lot of different characters like Miles Morales and a lot of new superheroes that have been introduced to the Marvel Universe in the last few years. There's also a lot of great references to the 1980 Secret Wars book, which I really liked, and it's basically just Doom going crazy and trying his best to take over like Doom usually does, but obviously he's Doom about it, and it's awesome. Also, constantly seeing the Ultimate Miles Morales interaction with the main 616 Peter Parker is awesome and hilarious, and I personally love it when the two characters interact with each other. Speaking of Doctor Doom, the next recommendation on my list is the Books of Doom. In this story, we get Doctor Doom's origin story. We find out why he hates Reed Richards, how he ends up being enemies with Fantastic Four, and basically how he became the Doom we know today. It's a great story, and you get a really good insight to Doctor Doom's mind, and it just kind of shows you what he's really like and what motivates him, and I really liked it because it's a pretty self-contained story as well, and it's just pretty good. Like if you haven't really read a Doctor Doom comic before, because I was actually quite new to Doctor Doom when I read this, so when I read this it just kind of helped me understand the character a lot more, and it's basically solidified him as like one of my favourite Marvel villains of all time. Definitely check out this book if you haven't already, or if you even haven't read any Doctor Doom stuff, definitely check it out. Next up in the list is Immortal Hulk. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know how much I love this series, and I highly recommend everyone goes and checks it out. It's a really good Hulk story, and it kind of focuses more on like the body horror aspect and just kind of how Dr. Banner, well Bruce Banner, copes with beating the Hulk, and I really love it because it's a completely kind of different take to what I've had before, and it has like the most like brutalist and like goriest artwork I've ever seen, and honestly I really love it. It's definitely a Hulk story that isn't for kids, so yeah, if you have a kid, don't make them read it because it is brutal, and it's a really good insight to like Bruce Banner's mind and also the Hulk's mind as well, and kind of you get a good idea of how the two of them communicate as well, which I really loved because that's something I really haven't seen before in a Hulk comic, and I really like seeing how the two of them communicate and just kind of like not the like arguments they have back and forth, but the disputes they have all the time and who has control over the body. I really love it, and it kind of shows how the two of them can work together as well if they really have to. Next up we have Wolverine Origins. The title of the book is pretty self-explanatory, and it basically tells you what Wolverine's origin story is. You see his life growing up in the 1800s, which I thought was awesome, and you just get his like good idea of who he is and who he was before he had all the adamantium in him, before he was an X-Men as well. It's a really good story, and if you're a big fan of Wolverine, I highly recommend checking this out if you haven't already. Both this and actually Weapon X are both really good Wolverine stories, and if you enjoy him as a character, I highly recommend checking out these two comics. Also, I don't know about you guys, but I actually really love when Wolverine has bone claws. It just seems like a lot more feral to me, and it's just awesome in my opinion. Next up we have Captain America, the Winter Soldier. So if you've seen the movie, it's basically the same kind of idea as this mysterious Winter Soldier turns up and Captain America's trying to figure out who it is, and obviously it turns out to be Bucky Barnes. It's a great story, and it kind of gives you a lot more detail and how Captain America and Bucky Barnes were good friends before he became the Winter Soldier. Because if you don't know it, I know it shows you in the movies that the two of them like good like best friends. In the original comics, Bucky Barnes was actually like Captain America's sidekick before he became the Winter Soldier, so it's a kind of like different dynamic, but the point is the two of them are still really good friends. And I mean, you see kind of the Winter Soldier, and when Captain America realises who it is, it's such a great moment, and personally I love it because it has a lot of emotional depth behind it, and it just kind of shows you like this guilt that Captain America's had for years because he felt like he let his sidekick die, like a kid he was supposed to look out for. So it's quite a different scenario with the movie because the emotional weight is a bit different, because like I said, he feels like he should have been looking out for this young kid who he took under his wing years ago, just to find out he's alive and is now an assassin working for Hydra. It's such a good storyline, and I definitely recommend checking it out. Next up on the list we have Civil War, which is written by Mark Millar. So if you know this story, you'll know that basically at the start of the comic, there's a big massive explosion involving a few superheroes, quite rookie superheroes actually. They're not like fully fleshed out heroes, they're just got like kind of few rookie ones. And a lot of people get killed in the process, and it makes the government introduce the Superhero Registration Act. And this basically means that the superheroes have to expose their identity to everyone while also working for the government, which has both Iron Man and Captain America divided. What I like about this story is it is just so brutal, like when compared to a lot of other comics, because with the superheroes they fight each other, and it's not as if they're just having like a wee kind of sprawl in an airport, as much as I like the movie, but it's not as if they're having like just a wee fight in an airport. This is actually like a brutal war, and lives are lost, and heroes are killing other heroes, and it just does this big massive aftermath after it, and the consequences going on lasted for years in the comics. In this book, Iron Man is like the straight out bad guy. It blackmails Superman, it blackmails Spider-Man, and it reveals his identity to the world. Basically says, if you don't do it, I'm going to do it for you, and then gives him the Iron Spider suit. And it just kind of has like Spider-Man jumping between sides. He was for Iron Man, and then he goes to Captain America next after almost being brutally killed. And it's just great because Captain America and his team are on the run, and Iron Man and his team are just going after them, and it's such an awesome story. And it is one of the most brutal comics out there, like Marvel wise, and I highly recommend you check it out, especially if you've seen the movie, which the not the book's based, especially if you've seen the movie that's based off the book, because it's a lot more brutal than that, and it is an awesome story overall. Finally on the list we have X-Men Days of Future Past. So in this story, it takes place in an alternate future where Sentinels have basically killed a lot of mutants, not even just mutants, but superheroes as well, so like Spider-Man, and basically Kitty Pryde, I don't know how to say her second name, has to go back in time and stop it from happening, and she has to find all the other X-Men and get them to help her. It's such an awesome story, and it just kind of shows like how the X-Men are always just kind of put into these like really bad situations, and no matter how much they try and help, it's always going to come back and bite them in the end, and humanity is always going to hate them essentially. It's quite a tragic story, but it gets across that point very well. It's got a lot of brutal deaths in it, like you'd expect, and it's just such an awesome story, and the artwork as well for its time is just amazing as well. So thanks a lot for watching the video guys. If you enjoy this kind of content, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I do a lot of comics reviews, recommendations, superhero movie reviews, Star Wars related stuff. So if you're into that kind of stuff, be sure to smash that subscribe button. And if you enjoy the video, hit the like button and let me know in the comments below what's your favourite Marvel comics and what one would you recommend to other people. Next up, I'll probably be doing like a 10 must read DC comics, so be on the lookout for that guys. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.